This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to Eons of Battle. I have played many war games, probably around 10, and I've tried out a lot more than that, so I'd like to consider myself an expert, and I know exactly what is the one thing that makes a war game a war game. And I would like to talk about the one thing that I think most war games are struggling with right now. But first, have you ever thought, man, if only I had my own website to show off my unique brand to the world, but I don't know anything about website design or hosting? Well, have no fear, Squarespace is here. Squarespace is the all-in-one, easy-to-use website builder that can make your dreams of a professional-looking personalized website a reality. Choose from any of their dozens of award-winning templates that'll give you a huge head start on crafting your unique platform. And with the suite of design tools Squarespace offers, including flexible layouts, color palettes, fonts, photo editing, background banners, animations, no matter what you need, Squarespace has the tools to make it a reality. Squarespace is fair and square, the best website builder around. So head on over to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to rock and roll, use our code EonsOfBattle to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now onto the war games. What makes a war game a war game? I was thinking this thought and I had a ton of ideas of what makes a war game a war game, but really, it all comes down to one thing. It's not having to paint your miniatures, because some war games come with pre-painted miniatures. It's not complicated rules or books, because there's a lot of other games out there that are very complicated. It's not even list building, because some games don't do any list building. I would say that the one thing that makes a war game is movement, positioning. The importance of where your miniatures are on the board is the most important thing to have a successful and real miniature war game. Every game out there, positioning is the most important thing. And what prompts that positioning? Because really, when you break a war game down, it's usually a war simulator. It's my dudes fighting your dudes. And the simplest games are the ones that's just fighting, that's all you do. And almost no war games are just fighting, because when war games are that simple, it makes it a real challenge to balance them, and the game becomes a little bit too simplistic. I know most everybody though, your first experience with any war game is usually just going to be whatever models you bought, whatever models your friends fought, just fighting it out on the tabletop. That's probably going to be the first few games, because then comes the added complication of setting up the board and setting up objectives. And objectives are something that I have been meaning to talk about, because recently I got to demo a brand new war game, Star Wars Shatterpoint, at Adepticon, and it really didn't knock my socks off. It was a very short demo, like 5 minutes. We really didn't get to see much of anything of the game. But the one thing that really irked me, it kind of awakened something in me, something that I hadn't really noticed. I hadn't noticed it with my eyes, but my brain definitely noticed it. And that is objectives. One of the most important things in a miniature game can be really lame most of the time. And what are objectives? Because if a miniature war game is really a battle sim for killing, objectives are the thing that make you actually have to move and actually have to play the game, and it's what gives a game its balance. Some things are better at killing, some things are better at capturing objectives. But often I find that those objectives are really lame. And what really struck me about Shatterpoint was drawing the objective placement card, and looking at it and just seeing, oh, just put down 5 objectives that are yellow dots in this X. And then the next turn, we're gonna draw another card. Ooh, you put the yellow dots in a circle. It all of a sudden awakened in me that this is a game. Like, I love the role-playing element of these tabletop war games. Sometimes I'm in the dark and twisted world of Malifaux. Sometimes I'm on the high seas in Armada. Like, I kind of get lost in the story. But all of a sudden, if the game is just boiled down to, you gotta make someone stand on that yellow dot over there, it just kind of sucks the energy out of it. And it's fine. Like, that style of objectives is fine. Almost every single game under the sun uses that, the go stand over there principle of objectives. But it doesn't have to be that. Does it have to be so lame? Some games get away with it by just dressing it up a little bit. That's not a yellow dot over there. That is actually the control center, and you have to go and turn off the control center to score a point. Just a little bit of world building can mean the world of not having it be really lame and simplistic and boring. But often, it can be a lot more interesting than that. I was playing a game of Malifaux where the objectives that we were given were set up on the board, just like, you normally would, but then to actually get the points, we were kicking these objectives around. Our models had to kick them across the center line of the board, and every single turn we scored points by having more of the objectives in our opponent's territory than they had in ours. And, we were still killing each other and stabbing and shooting in the background, but it really became this fun kind of game of soccer, where we were just kicking these objectives around, and it really, really changed the game. We were also playing a game of Warcry, where at the start of the game, we set up all of our objectives, but then only one objective was the real objective, and all the other ones were fake. And one of us knew what was going on. One of us got to know the secret of which objective was the real one, and their mission was to make sure that the other player didn't end up with the one real objective. And then the other player is just in the dark the entire game trying to figure out, trying to play with your opponent, like, is it this one? Is it this one? I bet it's this one. Your eyebrows went up a little bit. I bet this is the real objective. Like, coming up with fun and interesting scenarios for the objectives is so much more rewarding than just go stand over on that dot. Oh no, wait, a new turn? Okay, go stand over on that dot. It's not that exciting. And I've seen a lot of games try. A lot of games, I really appreciate it now that I'm really kind of analyzing what are objectives in games, because they are really important. If every game was just about killing, unless your rules were truly, truly perfect, it would lead to balance issues. If one faction is able to kill just a little bit better and faster than another faction. And it would mean that you wouldn't necessarily be forced into doing a lot of movements. I mean, we all know that every game usually has a shooty faction that would prefer to just stand back and shoot. And if there's no objectives to let them lose the game with if they don't interact with, then it just leads to kind of a bad experience. So objectives are really, really important. But it's really, really important for those objectives to actually matter and to actually be really, really interesting. Another objective trend about objectives that I've seen over the course of the last couple of years comes from Games Workshop. We're of course in Other Games April, and so let's just dunk on Games Workshop for just a little minute here. In Kill Team 18, the objectives in the back of the book were somewhat interesting. They were sort of dressed up. There was, I think, a mission called like Turn Off the Pumps, where you had to go up to each one and you had to turn them off. There was a bunch of missions that forced you to interact with the objectives because each objective did a certain thing. Then in Kill Team 21, the objectives got a little bit more simplified. Here are the objectives, go stand on them. You can pick them up if you want, but you never really have to. And then in the new mission packs, the objectives have gotten even simpler. There's fewer of them on the board, and they're always perfectly symmetrically laid out. Which is sort of necessary. Like, a game probably should, if it's a competitive game where you and your opponent are both trying to win, you don't want one person to have a bit bigger advantage of having more objectives closer to them than your opponents. But maybe that can be part of the game. Like, think about all of the childhood games we played. Capture the Flag, King of the Hill, Tag. Like, what if you could take those simple games that are really easy to understand and use them as the backbone of your war game? Maybe at the start of a game, a unit is elected to be the objective, and both teams have to do something about that. Or maybe there's only one objective, and you have to get to it on the board, and so everybody has to dogpile onto that one singular objective. The tricky thing is that it does dramatically alter the way the game is played, and so for more competitive games, you want a little bit of variety, and so but you want it to be super fair and predictable. And the way to be fair and predictable is, the objectives are either 4 inches from the side, 6 inches from the sides, or 8 inches from the side. That is the what makes the game unique, but it's super simple, and so no matter where those objectives end up, as long as they're perfectly symmetrical on the battlefield, all the games are going to be pretty much the same, and that means that competitive players can really learn what they need to do and plan accordingly. But maybe you shouldn't have to plan. I mean, if war games were only about the rules, then we would all play with the little blocks of wood. That's all we would play with, and it would be perfect. There wouldn't be any line of sight arguments. There wouldn't be any measuring about terrain or I can see your antenna. It would be so perfect if all of these games were just little blocks of wood, walking through a forest of blocks of wood. But that would be lame. We don't want that. We want these cool universes. We want Dead Zone. We want Malifaux. We want Armada. We want all of these cool universes to walk through and to experience. And so let the rules be like that too. I want weird, wacky, zany rules to play with. I recently played Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and holy cow is that game wacky. It has, I think conservatively, it has about 2.5 million different tokens. And at first it was really frustrating because I didn't know what any of the tokens did. But then after, playing the game for a couple of hours and kind of learning how it goes, I ended up really, really liking it because some tokens give you luck and some tokens give you all sorts of other abilities. And all of a sudden it just becomes this absolute madness of stacking on buffs and abilities so that my little guys can do a couple of extra things that your little guys can't get to do. And it just made it so much fun. I think games are becoming streamlined and simpler, which is a good thing because it makes them actually doable. You don't have to devote your entire self to figuring out every little thing. Not every single person can be the DM. You need one DM, you need one person who's absolutely in it. They know everything, they know exactly what's going on, but they let a whole group of other people have fun. And I would love to see that a little bit more in miniature war games. Maybe it should be like a different play style or a different type of gameplay. Like, there's Games Workshop is famous for their match play and then their other one that everybody always ignores. But maybe we should stop ignoring that other one. Maybe we should actually have some really interesting scenarios so that we can move our miniatures around the gaming table and have a really, really interesting story to tell. I mean, I just rattled off that Malifaux story and that Warcry story. I've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of war games, and I don't remember any of them. All of the ones that were just objective over here, you shoot me, I shoot you, all of the games that just boiled down to that kind of were fun in the moment. They were really fun to play, but they just left no impression on me. But man, do I remember those games where there was something weird about the objectives. There was something funny and fishy going on, and I really, really liked it. They made for interesting stories. Because really, how many different ways to play a game are there? There's not that many. But if you can create an interesting story, if you can create rules that build upon each other and make for really, really interesting situations, because that's what a war game is. War games are multiplayer video games. It's not really about what the game is. It's not even really about what the miniature universe is. It's about what weird things are going to happen between you and your opponents. And that makes for the most interesting war games. So I would like to see a toning down of standard issue, completely symmetrical objectives to make your guys go stand on. I feel like it is the easiest way to do objectives, but it's definitely not the best way to do objectives. I want to see big old mission packs full of weirdness. I want to play Capture the Flag. I want to play King of the Hill. I want to play tag in miniature game form. It just adds so much spice and variety, and that's what I would love to see. Please leave a comment of other war games that you play that you feel like really capture a good flavor of gameplay. And also leave a comment below thinking about what war games actually maybe are fun in the moments, but they don't really stick with you. I mean, there's tons and tons of similarities between tabletop war games and video games. They're basically the same thing, but tabletop war games are just more work. But there are some video games that I love more than anything, like Fallout New Vegas, which I now get to play on tabletop in Fallout Wasteland Warfare. And then there's a bunch of games I've played that I barely have any memory of. I must have played them for hours and hours and hours. I could probably look them up in my Steam library, but I can't think of them right now. War games are sort of role-playing games, and I feel like they should be treated as such. Rules can be a little bit more complicated, and that'll actually make them a little bit more fun, but the right kind of complicated, not stratagems, but complicated setup phases. There should be a little card that tells you exactly what to do, and then you'd have to play that with your opponents, and it'll just be a wonderful time. And you know what else makes for a really, really fun war game? Really nice terrain. And you know where you can get really, really nice terrain? That's right, our Patreon. This month we have the Twisted Train Station, a whole board's worth of beautiful scattered terrain, perfect for skirmish games like Malifaux or anything else you can think of. We also make one extra episode of Eons of Battle where we take a look at our viewers' miniatures and give them some critiques and ideas of how to improve their painting. And there's a special tier where you can get your name on one of my Black Templar Space Marines and join the Immortal Crusade. Playing Star Wars Shatterpoint really unlocked the idea of objectives for me and why they're sometimes so lame. but it was really, really interesting to think about. It's almost like the veil has been lifted from miniature war games. Now I can see the matrix and I see all of the things that we're actually doing. And it's really, really interesting to think about. I almost want to start my own. Thanks for watching.